The sound of footsteps echoed in the empty parking garage. Vivian fumbled with her car keys, the weight of a long day pressing down on her shoulders. Suddenly, a small hand clamped over her mouth. She spun, her heart leaping, until she saw wide, terrified eyes staring up at her. "Grandma," Leo whispered urgently, his tiny voice trembling, "don't say a word. They're listening to us." Vivian froze. "They?" Leo's next words chilled her more than the night air. "I heard Mom and Ms. Green talking. They said you have to sign some papers. And then, you'll disappear from this house forever." Vivian's keys slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the concrete. For a moment, her world stopped spinning. Her own daughter, Clara, the sweet child she had raised with love, plotting her downfall? In that instant, Vivian knew nothing in her family was as it seemed. And what began as a whisper in the dark, would unravel into a storm of betrayal, lies, and a fight for survival. The night air was thick and heavy as Mrs. Vivian walked through the nearly deserted parking garage. The dim fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long, distorted shadows across the cold concrete floor. Her heels echoed with each step, the sound unnervingly loud in the emptiness. Just as she reached for her car door, a small hand suddenly clamped over her mouth from behind. Startled, her heart jolted, until she recognized the trembling voice of her 10-year-old grandson. "Don't say anything, Grandma," Leo whispered, his breath shaky, his small frame pressed tightly against her. "They're listening to us." Vivian froze, her pulse racing. She gently turned, lowering her gaze to see Leo's wide, terrified eyes. His cheeks were pale, his lips quivering. This wasn't the playful boy she had tucked into bed so many times before. This was a child carrying a secret far too heavy for his age. In halting whispers, Leo revealed what he had overheard. He had hidden behind the half-closed study door earlier that evening and listened as his mother, Clara, and Vivian's trusted assistant, Ms. Green, spoke in hushed but urgent tones. They were plotting to make Vivian sign papers she didn't understand, and then to ensure she would disappear from this house. The word struck Vivian like ice in her veins. Her own daughter. Her own assistant. Betrayal coiled around her heart like a tightening fist. "Leo," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady, "are you certain of what you heard?" Leo nodded vigorously, his small hands clutching her sleeve. "I swear, Grandma. They said you won't be here much longer if you don't sign. And Mom told Ms. Green not to worry, that everything would look legal." His voice cracked. "I'm scared, Grandma." Vivian pulled him into her arms, holding him tightly in the silence of the garage. Her mind spun, trying to make sense of the impossible. Clara, the daughter she had raised, loved, and trusted, plotting against her? And Ms. Green, the woman who had been by her side for years, involved as well? Her body trembled, but not from fear alone. It was anger, sharp and rising, mixed with a chilling clarity. Something dark was happening in her own family, and now, with Leo's warning, she knew one thing for certain: she could no longer trust the people closest to her. Vivian stroked Leo's hair, whispering softly into the boy's ear. "You did the right thing telling me. But we must be careful now, very careful. Not a word of this to anyone else. Do you understand?" Leo nodded, burying his face against her coat. As Vivian finally unlocked her car, she cast one last glance into the shadows of the parking lot. The flickering light above seemed to pulse ominously, as if echoing Leo's warning. A storm was coming, and she could feel its weight pressing in from every side. For the first time in her life, Vivian realized her greatest threat wasn't from strangers in the outside world, it was inside her own home. That afternoon replayed vividly in Vivian's mind, like a scene carved into her memory. The meeting had taken place in her sunlit study, the room where she had signed countless contracts and celebrated decades of business triumphs. The air was filled with the faint aroma of fresh lilies, but beneath the pleasant exterior, something about the atmosphere felt wrong. Clara sat across from her, poised and graceful, her voice dripping with charm as she slid a folder across the desk. "Mother," she said gently, almost too gently, these are just a few documents to smooth the company's operations. A simple power of attorney, nothing complicated. It will save you stress, especially with everything you've been through lately." Her words were sweet, but they carried an undertone Vivian could not ignore. Clara's eyes gleamed, not with compassion, but with a calculating sharpness Vivian had never noticed before. Ms. Green, usually warm and approachable, stood stiffly by Clara's side. Her smile was tight, her hands clasped so firmly together that her knuckles turned white. She avoided Vivian's gaze, as though even a glance might betray something hidden. And then there was Mr. Hayes, the family's long-trusted lawyer. His presence should have been reassuring, but instead he seemed oddly rehearsed. He cleared his throat nervously, adjusting his glasses more than once as he muttered, "Everything is in order, Mrs. Vivian." Standard procedure, really. Vivian flipped through the papers. The legal jargon blurred before her eyes, but she forced herself to focus. The power of attorney wasn't simple, it granted sweeping authority. If she signed, Clara would hold immense control over both the company and Vivian's personal assets. Vivian looked up slowly, meeting Clara's eager eyes. "And this is truly necessary? Now?" Clara leaned forward, placing her hand tenderly over Vivian's. "Please, Mother. Don't burden yourself with worries. Trust me. I only want to take care of you." But the words rang hollow. The tone was too polished, too carefully chosen. Vivian had negotiated with ruthless businessmen in her time, and she knew when someone was performing rather than speaking from the heart. Her instincts screamed at her to stall. With a measured smile, she closed the folder and slid it back. "I'll review these later, after I've had some rest," she said calmly. For a split second, she caught the flicker in Clara's expression, a flash of irritation masked quickly by another sugary smile. Mr. Hayes shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Ms. Green's shoulders stiffened even further. Vivian excused herself from the meeting, but as she left the room, her suspicions deepened. The pieces of Leo's whispered warning began to align with what she had just seen. Clara was weaving a trap, and everyone in that room was complicit. Vivian's heart pounded as she walked down the hallway. Something terrible was unfolding, and unless she stayed vigilant, she could lose everything she had built, not just her company, but her very freedom. Leo's small voice trembled as he recounted the chilling words his mother had whispered to him. "She told me, if I ever told anyone, bad things would happen," he said, staring at the floor, his hands fidgeting nervously. "She said even you, Grandma, wouldn't be able to protect me." Each word pierced Vivian's heart like a blade. Her daughter, her own flesh and blood, had used fear to silence a child. A 10-year-old boy should have been worrying about school projects and soccer games, not threats from his mother. Vivian gently cupped Leo's face, forcing him to meet her eyes. His wide pupils shimmered with tears. "Leo," she said softly but firmly, "you are safe with me. No matter what your mother says, you did the right thing. I will protect you." But deep inside, Vivian's resolve hardened. Clara's betrayal was far darker than she had first imagined. It wasn't just about greed, it was about control, manipulation, and cruelty. If Clara was willing to threaten her own son, there was no telling how far she would go. That night, after putting Leo to bed, Vivian sat alone in her study. The house, usually her sanctuary, now felt like hostile territory. Every shadow seemed to conceal Clara's schemes. She knew she could not fight this battle alone. One name surfaced in her mind, David Carter. David had once been the head of security at her company, a man of quiet strength and unshakable loyalty. He had retired years earlier after an injury, but she remembered him as someone who saw through deception, someone who protected without hesitation. If there was anyone she could trust in this storm, it was David. The next morning, she called him. His deep voice on the other end was calm, steady, exactly as she remembered. "Mrs. Vivian," he said, "it's been a long time. What's happened?" Vivian hesitated for a moment, the weight of humiliation pressing on her. To admit that her daughter was betraying her felt like exposing a wound. But she forced herself to speak. "David. I need your help. It's Clara." She's plotting something against me, and she's dragging Leo into it. There was a pause, and then David replied with quiet certainty. Tell me where and when. I'll be there. For the first time in days, Vivian felt a flicker of hope. Clara might have allies in the shadows, but now, so did she. Over the next few days, Vivian noticed something unsettling. Clara insisted on preparing her meals, soups, teas, even desserts. At first, Vivian thought it was a gesture of care, but soon she detected an unusual bitterness lingering in the food. Sometimes, after eating, she would feel dizzy or unusually fatigued. Her instincts told her the truth. Clara was trying to weaken her. One evening, as Vivian pretended to sip the herbal tea Clara brought, Leo slipped into the room once his mother had left. Grandma, he whispered urgently, don't drink it. I saw Mom put drops from a small bottle into your cup. Vivian's stomach turned cold. She set the untouched tea aside and hugged Leo tightly. His courage was beyond his years, and yet, his voice carried the fear of a child trapped in an adult scheme. Together, they devised a plan. Leo would keep watch whenever Clara prepared food. On one occasion, while Clara's back was turned, Leo managed to steal the tiny bottle she used. Inside, a faint chemical odor confirmed Vivian's suspicion. It wasn't medicine. It was a sedative. But Clara's cruelty didn't stop there. One night, as Leo overheard another hushed conversation, he returned to Vivian pale and shaken. Grandma, he whispered, Mom said Ms. Green has to keep helping her, or else Sophia won't get treatment. Vivian frowned. Sophia? Leo nodded. Ms. Green's daughter. Mom said she's really sick, and if Ms. Green doesn't do what she says, she won't pay for the medicine. The revelation hit Vivian like a blow. Clara wasn't just preying on her, she was exploiting Ms. Green's love for her daughter, turning a desperate mother into a pawn. Suddenly, Ms. Green's nervous behavior and her silence made sense. She was trapped in Clara's web as much as Vivian was. Vivian's hands trembled, not from fear but from fury. Her daughter had crossed into monstrous territory, drugging her own mother, manipulating an assistant with her child's health, and using Leo as a terrified witness. As Vivian stared at the stolen bottle in her hand, she whispered to herself, this isn't just betrayal. This is war. For the first time, she realized the scale of Clara's plan. It wasn't about helping the company. It was about stripping Vivian of everything, her wealth, her freedom, even her dignity, until she was erased completely. But Clara had underestimated two things, Leo's courage and Vivian's resolve. And with David quietly gathering information in the background, the tide was about to shift. The next morning, Vivian drove quietly to St. Mary's Hospital, the very place Clara had mentioned countless times while justifying Ms. Green's cooperation. Her daughter needs expensive treatment, she could die without it, Clara had repeated with such conviction that even Vivian had nearly believed it. But today, Vivian wasn't here to comfort Ms. Green, she was here to uncover the truth. In the sterile white corridors of the hospital, Vivian found Laura, a retired nurse and an old friend from her charity days. Laura still volunteered part-time in patient administration. Vivian pulled her aside, her hands trembling slightly. Laura, Vivian whispered, glancing around, can you help me? I need to verify some medical records, it's about a girl named Sophia Green. Laura frowned but nodded. For you, Vivian, of course. Give me a moment. Minutes later, Laura returned with a small folder. I don't know what you've been told, but this is Sophia's real file. Vivian's heart pounded as she opened the documents. She skimmed through test results, doctor notes, and prescriptions. Nothing pointed to a severe illness, only a mild seasonal infection and traces of stress-related fatigue. There was no mention of heart disease, no record of urgent operations, no expensive medication. Her blood ran cold. Clara had lied. Laura. Clara said Sophia was critically ill, that her condition required costly surgeries, Vivian muttered, clutching the papers. Laura shook her head firmly. That's impossible. Look here, her last visit was for a simple cold. She's healthy. Vivian pressed a hand against her chest, feeling both anger and sorrow. Clara hadn't just manipulated her. She had enslaved Ms. Green with forged lies about her daughter's health, exploiting a mother's greatest weakness. Driving home, Vivian's thoughts churned. Clara forged medical documents. She blackmailed Ms. Green. She threatened Leo. And now she's coming after me. For the first time, Vivian realized the scale of Clara's deception was bigger and darker than she had imagined. Clara wasn't desperate, she was deliberate. And people's lives were nothing more than tools in her ruthless game. Vivian tightened her grip on the steering wheel. She had to act before the trap closed entirely around her. The polished oak table gleamed under the boardroom lights, but the atmosphere was suffocating. Vivian sat at the head, her pen poised reluctantly over the thick stack of legal papers, the so-called power of attorney Clara insisted she sign. Clara, dressed immaculately in a cream suit, leaned forward with a practiced smile. "Mother, this is just a formality. You've run the company long enough. Let Jason and me take care of things from now on." At her side, Mr. Hayes, the family lawyer, shuffled his papers, his eyes avoiding Vivian's. Ms. Green stood near the corner, pale and trembling. Vivian's hand hovered above the dotted line, her instinct screaming at her not to sign. Just then, a voice cut through the silence. "Mrs. Vivian, wait." Everyone turned. Ms. Green's voice shook, but her eyes burned with desperate courage. She stepped forward, clutching a small USB drive in her fist. "I can't keep this secret anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "Clara threatened me, she lied about my daughter's illness to force me to cooperate. But I recorded everything. Please, you can't sign those papers." The room erupted. Clara shot to her feet, her smile vanishing. "What are you doing, Green? Think very carefully about your next words." But Ms. Green pressed on, sliding the USB across the table toward Vivian. "On this drive is proof, your conversations, your threats. Everything." Before Clara could lunge forward, the doors burst open. Leo rushed in, followed closely by 2 police officers. His small frame shook, but his voice was steady as he cried, "Grandma, I told them everything. She wanted you gone. She wanted the house, the company, everything." The officers moved quickly. "Clara Thompson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and elder exploitation. You have the right to remain silent." "No!" Clara shrieked, her composure crumbling as she tried to shove the papers off the table. "This is a mistake. Jason, tell them." Jason, Vivian's son, surged forward, his face twisted in anger, not at Clara, but at the police. "This is insane. She's my wife. She wouldn't do this. Mother, stop this madness, you're being manipulated." Vivian's heart clenched as she watched her only son defend the very woman who had plotted her downfall. Clara's eyes darted to Jason, filling with crocodile tears. "See? Even Jason knows I'd never hurt you." But the evidence spoke louder than her performance. One officer played a clip from the USB, Clara's cold voice echoing through the boardroom speakers. "We'll drug her meals, get her signature, and once the transfer is done, she'll disappear from this house. Permanently." Gasps filled the room. Jason's face went white, the denial cracking in his eyes. Vivian rose slowly, her voice firm despite the storm inside her. "You nearly destroyed this family, Clara. And Jason, if you cannot see the truth now, I fear you may never." The officers handcuffed Clara, her shrieks fading as she was dragged out of the boardroom. Silence settled heavily, broken only by Leo's trembling hand clutching Vivian's. The boardroom, once a place of power and ambition, had become the stage of betrayal, courage, and truth. Vivian knew the battle wasn't over. But for the first time, she felt the tide turning in her favor. The boardroom was still heavy with the echo of Clara's arrest when Mr. Hayes, the family lawyer, stood frozen in place. His usually neat posture collapsed into a slouch, sweat dripping from his temples. He looked less like a man of the law and more like a trapped animal. Vivian fixed her sharp gaze on him. Mr. Hayes, you were complicit in this. What else are you hiding? He hesitated, clutching his briefcase as though it could shield him. Finally, under the pressure of the officers and Vivian's unyielding stare, his voice cracked. There's something you all need to know. Something Clara made me keep secret. Ms. Green frowned, her hands trembling on the table. What do you mean? Hayes swallowed hard, his words spilling out in fragments. Your daughter, Sophia, the one Clara used to control you, she wasn't your daughter. The room went silent, the air sucked out as if a bomb had gone off. What are you talking about? Ms. Green's voice broke, disbelief flooding her eyes. I held my baby in my arms. I raised her. She is mine. Hayes shook his head, tears gathering. No, your real child died shortly after birth. Clara, she orchestrated a switch. She substituted her own child, the one she had in secret with a man outside the family, and passed her off as yours. She knew you were too weak, too devastated to question the hospital records. She used your grief to bind you to her forever. Ms. Green staggered back, her knees buckling as she clutched the edge of the table. A strangled cry escaped her lips. No, this can't be true. Sophia, my Sophia. Leo rushed to her side, holding her arm, his innocent eyes wide with confusion. Grandma Green, does that mean Sophia isn't really your daughter? Tears streamed down Ms. Green's face as she whispered, she was my daughter in my heart. Always. But Clara used my love as a weapon. Vivian's stomach twisted in rage and sorrow. She turned to Jason, who sat rigid, his face pale, his fists clenched. Jason, Vivian said softly but firmly. Now you see the depths of her deception. Clara lied to you, to me, to Ms. Green. She poisoned everything she touched. Jason's voice cracked, his denial shattering. All this time, I defended her. I let her use Leo. I let her manipulate our family. And I called you, Mother, the manipulator. His eyes brimmed with shame as he buried his face in his hands. The boardroom was thick with grief, betrayal, and raw truth. Ms. Green wept openly, the revelation breaking her spirit, while Vivian placed a steady hand on her shoulder, grounding her in the storm. For the first time, everyone understood. Clara's cruelty wasn't just greed, it was calculated exploitation of love, trust, and vulnerability. And now, her empire of lies was crumbling. But for those left behind, the wounds would take far longer to heal. The courtroom was hushed when the verdict was read. Clara stood with her head bowed, her once confident smile replaced by a hollow, defeated stare. The judge's voice rang clear, Clara Reynolds, you are hereby convicted of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to unlawfully seize assets. Gasps echoed from the gallery, but for Vivian, it was not a moment of triumph, it was a bittersweet end to a chapter of betrayal. Ms. Green sat nearby, her eyes swollen from weeks of tears. The judge acknowledged her role, noting that though she had acted under duress, she had still participated in Clara's schemes. Given the coercion and threats you endured, the court spares you prison, the judge declared. Ms. Green collapsed into quiet sobs of relief. After the hearing, Vivian approached her. You are not alone anymore, my dear, she said gently, taking Ms. Green's hand. Clara used your love for Sophia against you, but now you will be free to love her without chains. It was then that Vivian made her decision. She would stand by Ms. Green in her petition for custody of Sophia. The little girl had lived under Clara's shadow, confused and manipulated. She deserved a home filled with honesty, not deceit. Vivian, using her influence and resources, ensured that Ms. Green had the legal support she needed. The courts agreed, Sophia would remain with the woman who had raised her with tenderness, regardless of blood. For Jason, the revelations had been a devastating blow. At first, he wandered the halls of the family home like a ghost, weighed down by guilt. But one evening, he sat with his mother at the dining table, his eyes red with shame. Mother, he whispered, I was blind. I defended her while she destroyed us. Can you ever forgive me? Vivian's heart ached, but she nodded. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, Jason. But repentance can shape the future. Prove to Leo that you've learned. Be the father he deserves. Leo, innocent yet wise beyond his 10 years, became the ray of light in Vivian's twilight years. His laughter returned to the house, his drawings now filled with bright colors rather than dark scrawls of fear. Often, he would curl up beside his grandmother, whispering, "You're my hero, Grandma. You kept us safe." Those words healed wounds that no verdict could. As for Ms. Green, she returned to Vivian's service, though their relationship had shifted into something deeper, trust forged by suffering and redemption. She raised Sophia with patience and love, determined to give the girl the childhood Clara had stolen from her. Sometimes, Vivian would watch them from her garden window, Ms. Green tending flowers while Sophia skipped beside her, laughter mingling with birdsong. For Vivian, peace came not in grand victories, but in the quiet moments, morning tea shared with Leo, Jason slowly rebuilding trust, and Ms. Green smiling again after years of shadows. She knew life would never be without scars. But scars, she realized, were proof of survival. In the end, justice had been served, but more importantly, love had been reclaimed. Surrounded by those who remained, Vivian finally felt something she thought she had lost forever: serenity. And in that serenity, happiness bloomed once more.